Good afternoon. Welcome to the Multimedia Services session. I can see a number of similar faces from the video conferencing session earlier. Apologies for you having to see me again. In the same way we're seeing a huge development in video conferencing, video streaming is having a similar renaissance across Europe and in the US, and we're seeing the bandwidths available in the networks now to be able to support the high quality streaming that we wish to be able to see. And a lot of work is going into providing these services, not only to provide the networks to support them, but to provide portals to allow people to access the content, find the content that they want. In some ways, it seems that finding the content you want to see is much harder than actually getting it across the network. We'll start this afternoon with a local presenter. Zvonimir Zelenika is from CARNet, and he's going to tell us something about CARNet's network.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Right, I can hear myself. That's good. My name is Zvonimir Zelenika. I used to work for Croatian Academic and Research Network. I'll sort of talk a little bit more of it about it later. And what I'm going to talk is the CARNet Video Network, which is basically our project through which we try to create a new, modern multimedia infrastructure. Now I'm sort of throwing a lot of new words into sort of play. Multimedia infrastructure. What is multimedia infrastructure? And that's something that I'll try to explain in these next 20 minutes, half an hour, before Steve kills me. Okay, a few words about us. The CARNet started doing multimedia in 1994. In the beginning, those were very small MPEG files and no sound and God knows what, actually for World Festival of Animated Film, which was held in Zagreb in 1994. Sort of second wave of multimedia came with high bandwidth streaming, which we started doing in 1998 together with ATM video conferencing. Some of you have probably used CARNet cell-stack equipment for it. Third wave was in 2000 with CARNet Media on Demand project starting and room video conferencing services. Basically, we moved our video conferencing slowly to H3 to 3 video conferencing, and we stopped using ATM some time ago. Actually, we still sometimes use them. The fourth wave is emerging. This is not looking very properly because it's not the proper font, but okay, the fourth wave of multimedia in CARNet is emerging, and we're rethinking the entire concept of multimedia, and we are trying to create a puzzle and then build every small piece of the puzzle into sort of big picture of multimedia. This works. Okay, note on the authors. I'm Zvonimir Zelenika. I was doing multimedia in CARNet since 1996, doing ATM video conferencing, streaming, solutions development. Now I'm acting as a research advisor because I have left CARNet some time ago, but there is still a team working multimedia in CARNet, and one of them is Robert Maček, sitting here in the first row. He has joined our multimedia effort in 2001, actually in CARNet User Conference 2001. He's developing the streaming solutions most of the time, and these days he's running around 3/4 insane because of the organization of the video conferencing, of the streaming part of the conference. Okay, what is multimedia infrastructure? There is sort of, actually first when I got around it, it was a book which was talking something about multimedia, and it sort of defined word multimedia infrastructure, and then sort of by working out the definition, sort of I at the end came out with the synergic total of all hardware, software, knowledge, organization, everything, all elements required for development and deployment of multimedia services in internet service provider, content service provider, content provider, national research educational network, or wherever. What happened is that we got lost in doing multimedia. We're doing small bits which didn't have much sense when you put them all together. So we went back to the basics, and we started thinking, what are all the things, those little elements we need to provide some cool and nifty and groovy multimedia stuff to our users. Okay, so what stuff? In the beginning it was a question, what is and what is not multimedia? At some point, we were very divided between people doing multimedia and people doing video conferencing, because video conferencing came from mostly networking people, while streaming came from more like services-oriented people. What are all the building blocks of the puzzle you need sort of to build a multimedia effort and multimedia services? What are we? We at the end defined ourselves as internet service provider, of course, for academic network, but we're also content provider and content services provider for the academic community and even wider. A big problem you have when you deal with multimedia is how to talk with network people and how to understand people from the art communities. Because those are the old things you have to know, and you have to work with them in God knows what ways to sort of create something in multimedia. Because we are not the content creators, but sometimes we are, but we do not want to be. There are some people who have the content, who have something to show to the others, but it's very hard to talk to them because they are sort of artists lost in time and space, usually. Further, the question was how to organize ourselves and what parts of entire puzzle we can outsource to our partners, like universities, student organizations, faculties of art, and that sort of things. Okay, therefore, what are the three basic blocks of multimedia infrastructure? We're sort of building a new generation CARNet network, which is called GITA, which means gigabit CARNet, but in Croatian also it means pig, actually a little pig. And so we are envisioning new multimedia on three very distinct and identifiable layers. One is multimedia network, two is multimedia services, and three is multimedia applications. Well, what would be a multimedia network? Well, it's very simple. Two things you need. One is bandwidth, one is multicast. Not multicast, actually. Multicast doesn't help with some things, but with some things sort of you can get away if you have multicast. We have had lots of bandwidth ever since 1995. We've been having ATM backbone and 155 megabits ever since 1995. But in those 8 years, we never had multicast, which is one very long and very sad story, which has numbers of beginnings and attempts, and now we're going to put multicast in our network, but at the end, we said, well, the heck with the multicast, we'll wait for the next backbone, and then we'll implement multicast in the next generation backbone. What do we need to have in the network? We have to have a multicast, and we have to have all those 3-letter abbreviations and fancy 4-letter abbreviations in our network, TLAs and FFLAs in our network, sort of to be able to provide multimedia on sort of networking, network-supported multimedia. Multidisciplinary approach is very crucial here because we've been very often too much divided within our organization on networking and on service people. Service people were doing the streaming and content thing, and network people were doing the network. And the network people said, no, you can't have multicast because our network concept goes wrong if we put multicast there or whatever happens. So why should you like to have those ports sort of open on our routers? We do not want you to have those ports open on our routers. And we said, well, we can't do video conferencing if you don't open those ports on our routers. So it was very long and very painful sometimes, but at the end we got ourselves talking, and there are some sort of working groups within new next generation CARNet network which are sort of working towards sort of building a very good backbone which will support multimedia. Okay. Multimedia services on that second layer, they're basically easy to spot because those are mostly the GUI hardware you basically are offering as a service to other people. We have a big 300 gigabyte archive for multimedia content which has sort of metadata models on it. That is a service because we provide it to anyone. Basically, any faculty can come to us and say, oh, look, we have some content, can you put it on your server? Because, I don't know, our link is too slow, we don't want to administer our own media server. We just sort of bring the content to you, and then you will stream it for us and host it for us. Then we have servers which support Windows Media, Real Media, QuickTime, IceCast, QuickTime Darwin Streaming Server, MPEG, and God knows what. And we have several production systems which are sort of three-quarters professional systems, which you can already sort of create some nice and flashy things. Also, what are the multimedia services that we are sort of providing to the others? Those are video conferencing rooms. So basically, you can come on every university and sort of any bigger faculty, some bigger faculties. There's always a room which was funded by CARNet, which sort of gives you video conferencing terminal and everything sort of you need to do video conferencing. Also, the video conferencing infrastructure. Why am I talking also about video conferencing and not only about multimedia? Because it's wrong to divide those two things, to divide video conferencing and multimedia. You can divide them on the networking part, where sort of it's very different. What do you need for for video conferencing and what do you need for multimedia. But on sort of application level, on services providing level, it is crucial that you integrate those two things into sort of one single multimedia or media or hypermedia services. Not easy to spot are some services which usually elude you, which is something that we also provide to other people in academic community. The first one is consulting, because we have to help other content authors, because you have art folks which know how to make a video, but they don't know how to encode it and do whatever it is necessary to adapt it for a network. We have our knowledge base, we have agreements, arrangements with courses at faculties that we provide the topics for their sort of papers for the courses, and also we provide training to our education program in CARNet at the point. And also we are giving away lots of free money and free stuff to various sort of faculties which sort of want to do something in multimedia or doing something, and then we help them or just sort of give them the box with the encoding machine or something like that. So at the bottom you have those visible manifestations of multimedia. Those are the sort of you can see very easily, and that's the eternal quartet of video conferencing, on-demand streaming, streaming of program from an archive that sort of we called CARNet TV, and also live coverage of the events such as this one. But it's very, again, a mistake to sort of think of it in this sort of division, because sort of a good multimedia, we do not talk about these sort of applications now. We talk about the integrated interface towards the multimedia content. And you know, how many of you have been on a conference web, the multimedia part? Probably some of you have been. All right, so there are some people sort of waving their hands. Basically, it is integration of two of these three elements. If we had introduced here also that we are streaming the things that people are doing on our video conferencing codecs, then we would have sort of an integrated interface towards multimedia, streaming and video, sort of multimedia archive, video streaming, and video conferencing. Okay, the problem when you develop an integrated media interface is that you need a very multidisciplinary team, because in the same project you'll have someone encoding and recoding the video content and audio content, but also you have to have someone programming the bloody database to sort of give you the list of the sessions in the proper way. So what you need is a very diverse portfolio of knowledge to sort of be able to create an integrated media interface. And what you also need is a very strong multidisciplinary team, which is very often a very hard thing to do. Okay, already we're arriving at some general conclusions, and you probably, after I'm finished with them, you'll probably be thinking it's just a bunch of wishful thinking, and that you could have thought of this, and that what are we talking about actually, and why are we wasting your time, and that you want your money back because this is not what you paid for. These are some conclusions as we sort of have experienced in our, 9 years of doing multimedia. It's good to segment things into small bits. Then when you've got things, little bits ready, it's sort of better to do them, sort of not to have a big project and that we will, in 3 years, we'll sort of create, I don't know, God knows what. But just make small steps. Small steps here, small step there, small step there. And then after a while, you see that you have done lots of things and that they work. And if they work together, that's even better. If they don't work together, what the heck. It's important to have metrics, however stupid they are. You'll have to monitor your service and constantly know how many people are watching your streams, how many gigabytes of content do you have in your archives, how many gigabytes of content have you transferred, how much your video conferencing equipment is in use. You know, you create a video conferencing room, spend lots of money on it, and then you realize that nobody has been using it for a month or two. And also have a plan, and then you sort of map the metrics to the plan. Okay, by plan we will increase multimedia content delivery in 5% every month, and then you sort of plot the metrics against the plan, and then you see we're doing fine, we're not doing fine. Sort of helps. Okay, these are some other conclusions which are also sort of very, very common. Is talk to network people. It's hard to do it because they don't get out much, but talk to them. It's hard to talk to content creators because they're insane. They're completely mad, all of them, and they're lost. So it's very hard to talk to them at the end. Expect the failures. Expect to sort of work for weeks and bring tons of equipment and 10 people to some conference site and then have 2 people watching the stream. That happens. sad, but sometimes sort of you have to expect and accept the sleepless nights and failures and all those horrible things that will happen to you if you start doing multimedia. But at the end, sort of, it turns out sort of worthwhile, I hope. Okay. There has been some discussion on TF Stream mailing list when we started talking that we will be doing our coverage of the conference with Windows Media. Who has been participating in that discussion? Yeah, some of them sort of waving their hands. Why are we using Windows Media? Basically, when we said we will cover this conference with Windows Media Services Series 9, then they said, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're excluding some people. Have you tried anything else? Well, point is that we knew that we are sacrificing part of the users. GNU Linux users and some other Linux users until now there has been a contract that some company will make Windows Media Player for Linux platform. But point is that we did try everything else. We tried Real. We've been using Real for years. We've been using Streamworks MPEG-1 streaming, if anybody remembers that. We've been using QuickTime downlink streaming server. We have actually found some bugs and reported some bugs in downlink streaming server. IceCast was used. We actually didn't manage ever to start targeting the sort of video equivalent of IceCast.org. And we had some chances and tries with the Casena and Digital Fountain. If someone ever saw something working with Luby transformation, it's very sort of big thing in actually from technical standpoint. But at the end, we did come to a conclusion that Windows Media Services is currently the best, very available and very open platform. Because thank God Microsoft is becoming more and more standard. A few years ago, they were completely sort of on their own way. They would implement 90% of the standard and then do 10% of their own, which makes it completely uncompatible. But now they're coming better with every version. They're supporting out RTSP, SMIL, they've been supporting MP3, XML, MPEG-4, whatever they supported in Windows Media Services 9. They have very good codecs, excellent server platform, and good tools. What is most important, there is a very good API for developing integrated multimedia content. In Real, in MPEG-1, it was almost impossible sort of to sort of communicate between, let's say, a web page or application with real content because, I think it's 10 minutes. It's hard to program anything on your own, sort of to build up an integrated interface for anything. But now with the API of Windows Media Services, 10 minutes, it has become possible sort of to create very good solutions like the one that we've been using at the conference. Okay, so basically, we have had a few questions. Actually, this was sort of added at the end of the presentation. We have had some questions how we are doing the thing that we are doing at the conference. We have 4 encoders covering all 4 sessions. Here is there in the corner. Sort of there are 3 guys waiting around it and sort of doing nothing, staring at the ceiling most of the time. And the big thing that we have managed to do is synchronizing presentation, basically from this computer with the stream and the encoder there. It was only possible because of the Windows Media Services, and also the fact that you have an API which is sort of installed on the code on the computer. Then you can basically talk to the Windows Media Encoder from Visual Basic from any application. Basically, you can write a Visual Basic script which talks to the Windows Media Encoder and Windows Media Server. Then we have ads and jingles in between the sessions, and also we have a few-hour delay for archive. Basically, after this session, maybe 3 or 4 hours later, we have all of the content from this session already on the archive. Okay, we had some blunders with sound and slides, and those responsible have been shot. And the point is that the database is holding by a thread, basically. If someone just writes something wrong in the database, everything collapses. There are many hard-coded parts in the code, which is, of course, bad. And Robert here is between half and 3/4 mad. And 2 days ago, he was returning back home at 3 a.m. in the night, and has actually collided with a fox somewhere on the road. That much about sort of that's all the problems that you have with streaming. And the Zlatko, which is sort of standing there by the door, will kill us anyways. So we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Okay, so basically how it works. We have a PowerPoint presentation, which is here. And then we have a Windows Media Encoder, which is over there. And basically, every time I click the next slide, there is a small macro in Visual Basic which records the slide as a JPEG on a server. And also it sends a notification to the Windows Media Encoder there, also through Visual Basic, saying, hey, there's a new slide at the server waiting for you, and the slide is called blah, blah, blah. That's the name of the slide. And then when sort of the video comes to the player, apart from audio and video, it also contains script. And the script sort of says, at this point, you have a new slide. And then at that point, basically, the slide is pulled from a web server. The trickiest part is this communication between PowerPoint and the encoder. We tried like 50 different ways of doing it. And the things we tried were horrible. We were basically trapping the mouse event, sort of when somebody clicks a button on a mouse, and then sort of starting a batch script which then does something. But at the end, it ended up that it just took like 10 lines of code in Visual Basic, and if anybody's interested, we'll mail it to you, no problem. Okay, and how it works? Yes, this is basically the description, and all the session information is stored in one small database, which is then pulled sort of out. The languages in question is C#, and it's ASP.NET, sort of running on ASP.NET on Windows 2003, which we have been running for a year and a half, yes, ever since some beta version. Microsoft will kill us for it anyways. Okay, did it work? It worked fine most of the time, and we had some problems with sound, and we had some slides missing. Basically, someone made a mistake, and then the slides from the session are missing. Interesting, when we were making the archive, the US Federal Air Identification lecture has complete garbage of the sound. Simply, for some reason, there is actually complete garbage in the audio track, and we think that it's Homeland Security Ministry sort of doing something and said, no, you can't listen to that. No, you have to have RSA 128 encryption for it, or whatever. But more or less, it's a success, and sort of so far we have had most of the comments were good, some of them were bad. We sort of managed to fix some of the bad comments because they were in place, but it's okay. Use statistics up to an hour ago. Basically, I was changing the conference, and the car almost killed me because I'm changing the conference at the slides at the last moment. We had maximum 60 simultaneous users, which is okay. Maximum total going from the server was 40 megabits, though the streams are 300 kilobits per second, but when you sort of open the presentation, it sort of does fast buffering. Basically, it sort of uses much more bandwidth than sort of the nominal speed. So basically, usually we have 40 to 50 simultaneous users. As of an hour ago, we had 650 distinct IPs that would be users, not necessarily, but with a total of 61 gigabytes of data. That's for the last 2.5 days of the lecture. It's 500 hours at top quality, but not all people are watching the top quality and everything. Also, the archive sort of is running a few hours sort of later, and we already have 4 gigabytes transferred from the archive. Okay, and the summary. And we're thinking that we're doing good multimedia, and that our organizational framework makes sense. That sort of the way we sort of organize ourselves doing multimedia is okay. That things that we outsourced are better outsourced than done by us. We have problems with our technical teams because sometimes they're insufficient, because now you need to have programmers, web programmers, database administrators, content creators, video producers, everything at one single team, which is very hard sort of to come by and create. Because of that, and sort of very wide sort of teams, we rely on our student researchers in our research and development. Basically, we have students which are, apart from studying, they're also working at our lab, and sort of there's a big thank you to all of them because they have done many of these things possible. And of course, then when you start developing and integrating media interfaces, then you have to have very good programmers who know very small details of an API, because even on the internet you can't find many sort of examples and sort of how-tos and tutorials about it. Problem is that network multimedia has become much more than just audio and video. It has been a few years ago, and the content archives and indexing and search and God knows what has started to have more and more impact in how you do multimedia. And I think we're doing it. So if he doesn't commit suicide in sort of next few days, I think the multimedia in CARNet has sort of very good perspective. But if he does, then whatever. Okay, is anybody interested? How much time do I have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, it's Q&A. Listening. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Do we have
okay.
Hold on for a second for the microphone.
Oh. Hey.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yep. The presentations are integrated live, you say?
What?
The presentations, your PowerPoint presentations
Yes.
are integrated live. You can also do other applications. You can do browsers live. You can integrate, if somebody opens up a browser session during your presentation, you integrate that live into the stream.
Well, I can basically show you just a second. How does it work? Okay. Basically, wherever you can do anything that has to do where you can run Visual Basic. This is actually one presentation which is open, is constantly open, and simply it says any time when you have a slideshow, next slide, it's sort of when the person goes to the next slide, or wherever in application, if you have any other Word application and any other application which talks Visual Basic, you can do this. Basically, and then you say encoder.sendScript, basically send an event to an encoder saying there is a new slide, or there is a new event, there is something happening, there is, I don't know, train coming into the station, which is one of the things that I'm sort of thinking these days, because now I work at Croatian Railways. So basically, very easily this encoder send script can be sort of executed by anything else which talks Visual Basic. Answers the question? Yes. Okay. Next.
We have time for one more question, if there is anyone.
And there's one behind. There's one.
You mentioned some maximum number of simultaneous users.
Yes.
Does it mean you don't use multicast? Or another question is what is the limitation for this?
Well, the limitation is, of course, how much the bottleneck that we can find is the network interface card capacity. Basically, streaming is very low processor intensive because you can be just sort of packetizing and just sending it off, so you don't care. Answer to your first question is no, we're not using multicast. We're not using multicast because our network currently does not support multicast. And, well, also, it's not much of an overhead if we use unicast. We did have trials, sort of lab trials of multicast and been using multicast without any problems, but only on a sort of segment of network which works. Also, there is a way of, we could use multicast here and then sort of enable unicast rollover whenever there is a client which cannot handle multicast. The problem is we didn't do it because our network, our sort of backbone does not support multicast now.
And if you allow me, another question, you mentioned benchmark, measuring the total number of users. Do you have benchmark for current status of number of users right now?
Yes, I could, if I have 1 more minute. Can I say 1 more minute? Yes. Okay. Shit. Unfortunately, I don't have terminal services installed here, but if you could come by me later, I can show you from my laptop. I will connect on terminal server on our streaming server, then you can immediately sort of at any point see how much users we have. Basically, Robert has it here, but we can't. Okay, unfortunately, I don't have terminal services client here, so I can't connect to the server to check.
Thank you, Zvonimir.
Okay, you're welcome.